This summer, we're asking, what would the founders say? Matthew Peterson sits down with Charlie Kirk to kick it all off. Blaze News The Mandate starts right now. Welcome to Blaze News The Mandate. I'm Jill Savage, joined by Editor-in-Chief Matthew Peterson. It's the 1-year anniversary of the show today, Matt. I mean, can you believe all of the different things that we have seen in 1 year's time? By the way, 2 days after we started the show, that's when President Trump was shot.
Oh, yeah. I remember.
That's how it started.
It started with the assassination attempt and the divine intervention, and then had the mandate from heaven. And then after that, every weekend, it seemed like something outrageous happened. And we have seen it all. I mean, from the assassination attempt to the victory and inauguration, and then all of the confirmation hearings. I mean, all the controversy. It's been an incredible ride.
We saw the President of the United States announce on social media in an X post that he was no longer going to run for the top land in the entire world. Yeah, that seemed normal at the time.
Yeah, that was just on that random Sunday, right? Oh, I'm not going to run. Kamala's going to run. Very interesting. Very interesting. Need a second assassination attempt, right? Also, I mean, this has been a wild ride, and then also all the original stuff that we've done. All these stories on January 6th and the assassination attempt and many other things. It's been an incredible, incredible ride. And so many great guests, too,
Yeah, and in all of the chaos, we really want to go back to just what the founders wanted. So this summer, we're actually putting together a summer series. It's going to start tonight here. And every Friday, Professor Peterson, who happens to be a Washington Fellow with the Claremont Institute, will be taking you through. Matt, just tell them what you're going to be doing.
Look, the idea here is let's talk to some of the brightest minds around about what the founders would say, applying old American wisdom and history to where we're at to solve the crisis of our time. So the idea is in every episode, the first one is here with Charlie Kirk. We talk about what statesmanship is, how do we identify statesmen, how do we raise and form statesmen. He's a very thoughtful man about these things. And we're going to talk to a lot more people too about, the old stuff, the founders, but what would they say now? What can we learn from the past to directly address the biggest issues we face today?
It's the Friday Summer Series. So without further ado, here's Matt's interview with Charlie Kirk.
All right, Charlie, we are at the 2025 Claremont Statesmanship Award. They're going to give that to JD Vance. This is an incredible event. Claremont, of course, prides itself on statesmanship at the heart of what it does or what it teaches. This is something that you've been involved with now, really, we could say your entire life, right? I mean, statesmanship is tied to making this country great again.
Yes.
And making this country great. And I feel like this is a word that's, it's sort of a fancy word that people throw around, and people hear that word and it just kind of can go in one ear and out the other. So what does statesmanship mean to you?
Well, practically, I think we saw statesmanship on display from the president recently, where he was displayed with two options. The one was do absolutely nothing with Iran and just ignore it. The other one was, hey, go full regime change, John Bolton style. And the statesman first has to know what you want. You have to have what the telos is, right? Which is you have to have a destination. And so President Trump had a destination, which is like, well, there's a problem here. We've been talking about Iranian nuclear weapons for 20 years. He has. But I want American revitalization and not a Middle East quagmire. So he had a very firm destination in mind. And I think so often is that people who think they are statesmen or people who play statesmen on TV, there is no aim, there is no destination, there is no final form or final product. Where President Trump worked backwards, he said, okay, I want this to be wrapped up within a week. That was his first, so he said, how do I do this where I can have Iran have no nuclear weapons, but I ran on a mandate of disentangling ourselves from these endless conflicts, from no more quagmires, and then, of course, resisting the calls for regime change. And so that's what I think it means practically, and we can talk philosophically, too.
Well, yeah, let's talk more practically and work ourselves to the
practical is more fun, because anyone can...
Yeah, as well as we both know, the philosophic definition can start in any abstract fantasy land.
Well, you and I were talking off camera. It's like it's below the philosopher, but
Yeah, ultimately, philosophy in the Western tradition is higher because it's just simply knowing the truth about something. But the problem is people who call themselves philosophers are often suspect and talk in abstract terms. So let's talk about this a little bit more because we've both been around a lot of politicians and people who care supposedly about the country, and that's their job, whatever the politician in America's job is, right? What differentiates the person who is the statesman in 2025?
Well, first, I think when we're constantly trying to be held captive by ideology, it would be prudence, which would be practical judgment. And I think JD Vance embodies that incredibly well. You see, when you're in elected office, you have to be prisoner to the party dogma and the political expectations of the time. For example, when President Trump entered into the political space 10 years ago, think about it, it's been a decade, you would never be able to talk about a border wall, let alone mass deportations. You would not be able to talk about trade or foreign wars. And so a true statesman is able to identify the problems and then with the proper amount of moral courage and with precision rhetorically be able to address these things and then move the Overton window. You just look at 10 years from now, no one even talks about the wall anymore. Yeah. So, I mean, like the wall is not, like we used to talk about the border wall all the time. And now 10 years later, we're kind of like, okay, yeah, we got the wall. Where are the deportations? You look at how in the Overton window goes from that which is unthinkable all the way to public policy, right? It goes from like unthinkable to radical, I think, to neutral, to credible, to popular. I'm approximating.
How do you think that happened? How did the Overton window move? How did we get to the point where it was shocking that Trump talked about a border wall, right? And now all of a sudden we're at the point where mass deportations or bust has to happen or he's failed this movement.
First of all, we just have to recognize this is an unbelievable accomplishment. If he's done nothing else but move the Overton window that dramatically, it's just that's a legacy item amongst many others. I think it happened first and foremost because President Trump is who he is, and he fed off of the opposition almost as an energy life force. I don't know if we could have moved the Overton window on immigration, absent just becoming like London, if it wasn't for President Trump. And really just his emphasis and his focus, his dedication, and then building popular consensus. And understand, it took 10 years. I mean, even in the 2020 election, we were not talking about mass deportations. Right. And this has grown itself into a mass movement of public consensus. But President Trump also made the argument repeatedly. He was unafraid to go into the public space and to be able to contend with people of opposing views. And I think JD Vance is of a very similar vein. And so what does it mean to be a statesman in the modern era, especially in the quote-unquote Republican Party? It's you must be unafraid to challenge the own political dogma if it's actually not benefiting the nation or the body politic. And the three-legged stool of neoliberalism, which is endless war, invite the world, and import a bunch of plastic, right? Invade the world, invite the world, import plastic. Those are the three main core pillars of neoliberalism. Only a statesman can challenge those effectively.
Now, talk a little bit about motivation here, because one thing I think about a lot lately is, when you're evaluating talent, for instance, in a business or an organization, you want to know what drives people, and what happens when we grow up in life and we look around the cabin is that you notice a lot of people's motivation, especially in politics, right? Is as Bob Dylan once said, to get rich quick, get out of it and get the money and chicks. I mean, there's a lot of Congress people who are basically influencers at this point.
That's right.
And that's the world we inhabit. That's fine. It's always sort of been that way. But when it comes to statesmanship, I mean, how do you think about the motivation of the statesman, and how do you form that?
Well, it's incredibly important. I mean, President Trump's motivation is the nation. It is the country. It's the only reason why he ran again. Same with JD Vance. But most people in politics that masquerade or pantomime as statesmen, their ultimate cause is self-notoriety, popularity, power, prestige. And so they will do whatever is necessary. So then if that is their final cause, then everything that is a second or third or tertiary effect from there will be like, well, I have to take this vote because the most important thing is not the nation, but it's power, it's prestige, it's popularity. And then so you extrapolate that over 30 years, you're like, well, okay, that's one of the reasons why we're in the problem that we're in.
Right. And yeah, so this is so important, I think, for people to realize. And it's not like, it's not as people say a black pill. It shouldn't be depressing. It's just, this is human nature, which the founders understood. Of course, we're sitting here at this Claremont event. And they understood this. And there was a great book called Fame and the Founding Fathers by Douglas Adair, where he talks about how their fame was tied, they harnessed their ambition to do great things for the sake of the country, for the sake of the common good, rather than, the gram.
Yes, exactly. But that requires a detachment from the immediate and a elevation of the transcendent, which modernity has been so firm at not allowing the transcendent. I mean, you look at the tech companies, for example. Tech companies got away from any sort of emphasis on a national project, and basically all of our brain power in this country goes towards how can I customize an app that can better self-indulge your narcissism. And you think about like the Manhattan Project, you look at where the brains used to go towards these compelling world-changing projects. And now the best and brightest that we have, they will go through, how can I make, how can you order a gizmo better? Or a widget, or how can you customize your face on a filter? That's all fine. I mean, it's a free society. You have the agency to do that, but there's nothing transcendent about that, right? And so in order for it to be more than the gram or TikTok, it requires for you to then elevate something that is actually above us as humans, and we believe that to either be God or a transcendent purpose.
Yeah. The laws of nature and nature's
Exactly.
God, as it
That's
were.
right.
We're just celebrating
that's the birthday
July.
that we're celebrating right now.
Yes. So when it comes to the future, I don't want to be too optimistic, but
Careful.
because I know I should be relentlessly optimistic, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's the lesson. But when I look at the people that I hang out with, again, self-selection, but sort of Claremont fellows or just at the Publius Fellowship, I feel as if a lot of these younger people are much more in tune
Very much
with
so.
statesmanship in the sense that they actually want to make the country better and they don't care about the old prestige structure and all that. Do you think that's right?
Well, you think about it though, if you're young and you want to get involved in politics or being a statesman, that means that you are likely forsaking more money and more wealth in another field. You think about it, the top, similar to the technology example, but where the brain drain that has quietly been happening here domestically is that our best and brightest went away from politics and into business the last 30, 40 years, and the virtuous and the good and the noble, you know what I'm saying?
Yes, exactly.
And so then you have kind of a slop that has infested our politics. That's why President Trump stood out so much, is that he was a legitimately high performer outside of politics. So what you're seeing now, at least we see it at Turning Point USA, I know you see it at the Blaze and Claremont, is that the high IQ, high driven, virtuous people are now saying, you know what? Okay, fine, I could go make $200 million at Goldman Sachs, but that's not deep, that's not fulfilling.
Right. Yes.
Instead, I would rather go be a statesman. Yes. I would rather go work in the State Department. And these are people that could go make a ton of money elsewhere, which means that just monetary gain is not the most important. It's not the driving factor or motivator of so many in this generation. That, by the way, is closer to the World War II generation, the greatest generation, which puts sacrifice and a transcendent ideal above immediate, satisfaction, and also the founding generation. And that's where you get amazing accomplishment. When all of a sudden you say, it's not going to always just be about my comfort or my satience, or I'm actually going to put something above. What is that transcendent ideal? And if it is a nation, if even 5% of our brain power started to dedicate themselves to our nation, not just creating the next social media app, like what are you doing if you're creating another social media app? It's fine. Again, you can do that, but imagine if all of a sudden the people that have the capacity and the wherewithal dedicated itself towards a national revival.
So true. So well said. So for a lot of people, in the audience, a lot of people I talk to throughout the country, they wonder, they get frustrated with the people who aren't statesmen, right? The fact that so you say statesmanship by the United States Congress, and it's sort of a laughing matter.
It is
at
a
this
joke,
point.
yeah.
So they're frustrated, and they just want people who care about their country, and that's why they voted for President Trump, because they know that he does. I mean, why is he doing it now, right? I mean, even the last term, you could come up with like excuses for, well, maybe he wants to do this or that. He's just dedicated to saving this country. That's clear to them. But how do they select the leaders who will replicate what Trump is doing? How do you form these people, and how do you select them? Because there's a lot of people, they're voters, they're good citizens, they're concerned about their country. So what do they look for, and how do we form these people?
The binary that must be created is your elected official shallow or deep? And people think President Trump is shallow, but he's actually a very, very deep person, incredibly so. And what do I mean by that? Do they think about the deeper things? Are they willing to challenge pre-existing dogmas? I mean, JD Vance is objectively a deep person. He reads the great books. He understands philosophy. So you break that into kind of two different categories. And then you look at some of the people that have infected our congressional space. I would not think deep would be a word that we would use.
No.
And so I think we need people that are deeper, that are thoughtful, that are there also for the better worldview and the better view to win, not just who's going to be able to get conference chair.
Yeah. You can say that 1,000 times, and it won't be enough. I mean, it's astounding to me how the simple things matter, and the simple things are, why are you trying to do what you're doing?
Yes,
right? Political will.
why, yes.
This is where Trump, I think, showed us so
Yes,
much,
exactly.
and you've been a part of this the entire way through. Where in the last year, we've just seen him say, "No, we're not going to do that."
That's right.
And then the political will is there, and then it happens because he's doing it for the right reasons. Is that too simplistic?
No, it's not. And one of my depressing but also I would say optimistic revelations, both depressing and optimistic, is that almost every major problem facing America is a failure or a success of the will. Mm-hmm. We just didn't want to have a border under Joe Biden. We just didn't. We put up with violent crime in our cities. Not that there's some sort of like, oh, we know how to solve it, actually. Mm-hmm. And we also we put up with the idea that you can't walk the streets of LA at 2 a.m. That is a symptom and a consequence of conscious decision making. And so it really comes down to the will. And I mean, you guys taught me, we have will to power, will to pleasure. Like, do we have a will to our nation? Mm-hmm. And if we do, then we're going to have a country again. And that's where President Trump has this sometimes just awe-inspiring, some people would say metaphysical force that just doesn't stop. And because he has the will to act and the will to point towards ultimate purposes.
Yeah, it's amazing what a will to do good for your country and your fellow citizens can do. Amazing
That's right.
stuff.
As long as you're pointing to the right thing.
Yes.
Because you can think you're doing the right thing, but you could have will to catastrophe, like FDR.
Yeah. Our Hitler.
Yeah, exactly. I try not to say. Everyone mentions it, or Stalin, or
Yeah. He was a little on that, a little bit that way.
That's right.
So we're sitting here. Speaking of goodwill, we're sitting here at the Claremont Institute's event, which is a great event, giving an award for statesmanship here in the year of our Lord 2025 to JD Vance, who we have to say is a young politician.
He's
right?
phenomenal.
He's young compared to a lot of the old people who run this country, and he's remember they called him weird.
I remember. Yeah.
How does
Tim
this...
Walz calling him weird is really,
So what would your short pitch be for why it's obvious, just right, and fitting that JD Vance obtains this award this year?
Well, first of all, I mean, JD's a great friend, so I'm, incredibly biased. I was one of the first people to endorse him for Senate, like right out of the gate. I was day one or day two. And it wasn't that I knew that he one day would be president. I knew that this is what we need more of. Mm-hmm. A deep thinker, understands the issues, also a really wonderful family man, an entrepreneur. And so it's just been the hand of the Lord to see him ascend now to the vice presidents and maybe one day to be president of the United States, if that's, the Lord's will. And I'm going to be working hard on that any way I possibly can. But there's a lot of work you have to do here. But look, I mean, he's again, I'll go back to this. He's a very thoughtful person. Mm-hmm. And having dealt with him now as the vice president, he is constantly courting other people's opinions, very similar to President Trump. He understands the philosophical, but also the real. He doesn't just live in the clouds. He also lives in the weeds and the real life implications. And as a true statesman, he never forgot where he came from. He never forgot that he came from rural Ohio and Appalachia, and that is the connective tissue of his politics, which almost always reverts back to, okay, would 8-year-old JD Vance benefit from this? And the answer is yes, then okay, he'll work his way through that from not another unnecessary war, right? From restrictive immigration, from better trade policies. And JD Vance is someone, as a statesman, you must also be able to be made for the moment. Some people cripple under the moment. They crumble under the moment. And look at this. He was vice presidential nominee. He was barely a senator for 2 years. And he excelled in every single way. He's also a man of phenomenal moral courage. I mean, I wouldn't want to go straight to Germany with a NATO meeting and call them all. I mean, that takes some chutzpah, right? There's some guts there.
Oh, yeah.
But for all those reasons, JD Vance is more than deserving for that award.
Oh, yeah. I mean, just what you say, like to have someone who's actually thoughtful in politics. I mean,
it's very rare.
I like to say it's just good to see Twitter mutuals do well for themselves.
Exactly. Exactly. Someone that actually has more to say than just,
yes,
vote for me.
And so JD came to Claremont very early on when he was looking for President Trump's endorsement, because he was trying to make the argument, because he'd said some things like many people did. He didn't quite understand Trump at first, and he came to Claremont and was just very convincing. And that's when we all got to know him, and I think everyone was just blown away by how thoughtful he was, by how serious he was. And here we are now at this award. So, a lot of people don't even know about the Claremont Institute. Like they have no idea what the Claremont Institute is. And those who know, they know, right? So
that's why I'm here.
Yeah. So what is your thought about what Claremont is and does and the importance of this award?
It's the intellectual home of the new right. And it is of the youth, young, inspiring, sometimes provocative, boundary-pushing, philosophical momentum in the movement right now, which is why we're talking about mass deportations. And the most important thing, by the way, that Claremont has led on for 20 years is dismantling the administrative state. Yep. That is something that Claremont has never, ever lost focus of. But the fellowship was one of my most favorite weeks of my life, even though it was in Vegas. But it was really a fun time. It
was COVID time, people.
Yeah, it was. That's right.
Have a choice.
Usually it's here, but it was really a remarkable time to just learn from the brightest minds and just go all in and just think for an entire, I think it was like 10 days about why we are here and what is good government, what does it mean to be a good person, and the true and the beautiful. And so Claremont is a powerhouse that punches way above its weight.
Yeah, it was a pleasure to have you there. It's a pleasure to be part of this network myself. I'm also grateful.
Yeah, our friendship started there. Yeah,
and that's where it all began. And may it long continue.
Amen.
And thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I'm here at the 2025 Claremont Institute Statesmanship Award Day ceremony, soon to come, with none other than John Eastman of the Claremont Institute itself. So. Good to see you again. It's been a good weekend.
It's been a good weekend thus far, and we're looking forward to the dinner tonight.
Yes, and the dinner tonight celebrates statesmanship, which is this word that I'm asking everyone. Connotation in people's mind sounds good. We need more of that. But what the hell that is, other than the guys who we see in the statues, is a little bit murky, I think, to a lot of people these days. So what the heck is statesmanship?
Well, statesmanship is understanding the right course and pursuing it with the art of the possible, or the art of what's prudent. The full name of the Claremont Institute is the Claremont Institute for the Study of Statesmanship and Political Philosophy. The political philosophy teaches you what the right course is. Statesmanship, and the great statesmen we have as our models, Winston Churchill and Abraham Lincoln and George Washington, understood how best to achieve those fundamental truths, those principles, given the circumstances, the hand they're dealt with, as you will. Churchill once famously said, somebody said, well, you used to be liberal, now you're conservative. He said, well, yeah, but I've always been aiming at the same point on the shore. And depending what the winds and the currents are, I have to tack one way or another. Knowing what to tack, knowing when to tack and how to tack to achieve the ultimate purpose and the truth is the art of statesmanship.
So what is the ultimate purpose? And what's the goal?
Well, the ultimate purpose, I think, is most eloquently laid out in our Declaration of Independence. We begin with a couple of fundamental propositions and truths. All men, all human beings are created equal. They're endowed by their creator, not by any government, with fundamental inalienable rights. And the purpose of government is to secure those rights. Because we're all equal, that government, in order to be just or legitimate, has to be based on the consent of the governed. And when they cease to accomplish the purpose of securing us in our individual, unalienable, God-given rights, we have a right to alter that government to do better. And so the goal is to ensure our happiness, our safety, our prosperity, our unalienable rights based on consent of the governed. That's the goal. And how we achieve that goal at any given moment, that's the essence of statesmanship.
So the problem of statesmanship then in America would be you have to get the consent of the governed, right? Which we don't want to get rid of. We like that. we like the consent of the governed.
It's better than the alternative.
But you have to obtain that in some way. And so there, I kind of think of today's world in which so many people, just look at the polls, right? They know that they don't have statesmen. They don't have people who are leading them correctly. They understand that there's a lot of corruption in America. Most widely shared fear in America for over 10 years is the corruption of government officials. So people understand that. So how do you do that? I mean, what's the difference between someone who obtains the consent of the governed by doing what the media does, by whatever means necessary, by lying and propaganda, and the person who truly does?
Well, Jefferson spoke about this or wrote about it. He said, in America, the majority is always to rule, but for the majority to be rightful, for the majority to prevail, it should be rightful. I destroyed his quotation, and much more eloquent. We're not a democracy. This is, one of the fundamental fallacies of the modern discourse. We're not a democracy. The founders viewed raw democracy as dangerous as monarchy or despotism or aristocracy, because in fact, in many ways, it's a greater danger, because a majority bent on destroying the individual rights of members of a minority, they have the political power in being the majority. And so ours is a constitutional republic. It constrains the majority when they cease to act rightful, when they cease to act for the common good and are instead acting for their own good to the expense of others. Statesmen are come along rarely, unfortunately, but at critical moments to not just lead, but to instruct public opinion to follow that notion that our founders bequeathed to us, of unalienable rights, of securing those rights, of a government that is designed to further those rights, even against the will of the majority when it acts wrongly.
So the statesman has to, as a way, it's sort of educate in a way, or guide the people towards the right opinion, no matter what. And then
demonstrate through his own actions or her own actions the success of that possibility. Look, Great Britain stood up against Nazi Germany almost alone on the world stage because of the force of Churchill's will and encouragement to the people to understand the stakes of what was involved. Franklin Roosevelt, our own president at the time, kind of our first socialist president, but on this issue, he was absolutely right. He violated the law and launched munitions manufacturing and violated the Neutrality Act because he understood if Churchill wasn't successful in Great Britain, we would no longer be protected here either. And so he did that before the representatives of the people in Congress had come to the same realization that he saw. So Lincoln does the same thing, right? Lincoln understands the importance of protecting the Union, even against the assault that the Confederate States made against it, because if you destroy the Union, you then create on our shores a government perpetually hostile to the principles of the Declaration of Independence, and you create a house divided here on our shores that could not stand. Even 70 years later, the Western European powers still didn't think we'd succeed long term, and they were salivating for this split. Mm-hmm. Lincoln understood that before most people did, and statesman is then to deal with those questions in a prudent way at the moment, but also to educate his fellow citizens to come on board. Because ultimately, if you don't accomplish that last mission, you will be unsuccessful in the broader mission.
So why is it that there's so few of these people? Because there's a lot of people in the audience who they pray for these kind of leaders, right? They want to see more of this sort of leadership, but they know things are very corrupt. People are very corrupt. Why are they so rare?
Well, that's a little above my pay grade. You may have to ask God the Almighty that question on why so few. But look, human nature is itself sinful, right? Human nature always is self-interested. It's rare that you find somebody that's willing to rise above that or able, constitutionally, small c, able to rise above that. I was recently reminded of a toast that somebody gave in support of one of our old professors, William Allen, who's a scholar of George Washington. And he was asked the question, why do we revere Washington so much? In this era when all the other founders are being denigrated, well, Jefferson owned slaves. Washington owned slaves too, but you don't see the attacks on Washington. And Bill responded, because he gave everything and asked for nothing in return. A statesman understands that at critical times, the country's interest, the broader interest, the more noble interest, has to prevail even over your own self-interest. And it's rare the person that can do that.
Well, we wish there were more of them. And I guess one could also ask, okay, so they're going to be rare because, look, great people are rare. And we celebrate them and they get the statues accordingly. All right. But we still have the question of how we form them and how we ought to look for them in today's day and age, because everyone knows that we need them.
Well, we need them, but here's the danger. Somebody that's great enough to be an eagle is also great enough to be a lion. And that means you have to form their character, their soul, in order to make sure that they don't take the power that comes with greatness and abuse it for their own purposes. That's a hard thing to do. We at the Claremont Institute have gotten very good at that. So I would encourage anybody in your audience that doesn't know who we are to read up about us. If they're young, to apply for our fellowship programs. They're soul formation fellowships, but they're not theological. They're natural rights, or to use the language of the Declaration, they're rooted deeply in the laws of nature and of nature's God.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk a little bit about that. I mean, how has Claremont been able to select so many incredible young people? You've been running the John Marshall Fellowship with legal minds, lawyers, for a long time. You've been a part of this for a long time. What's the secret to finding all these people who, we should brag a little bit, who are all over this administration? I mean, your students, people they're all over the Trump administration. What was the secret to finding these people?
Well, you begin with intellectual capability, but there are a lot of people that are intellectually capable that can't pull this off. You have to then look for intellectual curiosity. You've got to look for a Socratic humility. I know what I don't know, and I want to come out and figure that out. A great example of this was Janice Rogers Brown, former California Supreme Court Justice, ultimately D.C. Circuit Judge, and very considered a front runner for a U.S. Supreme Court slot in her day. And she realized
an incredible person.
An incredible person. She now teaches in our fellowship program with me. But she realized at one point that she didn't know much about the principles of the American founding. She knew the history like everybody did, but she didn't know the deep principles of it. And so she went and got a new degree studying the principles of the American founding. You need that level of curiosity, because we're not providing students in our educational system with anything remotely comparable to what our forebears got. And the mission of the Institute's fellowships is to, in a compressed way, give them an inkling of the noble thoughts that are there that they can then study and advance. And you have to have both the capability, the intellectual horsepower to do that, but also the curiosity to sustain it.
Well, I just thank God I'm part of these programs, and it's been a real a privilege to see, just in the short time I've been involved, what's been accomplished over the years because of the work of you and others. But we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about this year's Statesmanship Award. Claremont gives this out not every year anymore. This isn't because there's not that many of them. So JD Vance, I mean, people could say, well, he's, there's no bigger fan than me, but I'm playing devil's advocate. Someone could say, well, JD Vance is very young, and how can you give a Statesmanship Award to someone so young?
So JD Vance a few months ago gave a speech in Germany that challenged our NATO allies to stop their decline in denialism that is going to destroy Western civilization. And that speech has already had a profound impact. It probably was more responsible for the success of the conservative candidate in the Polish elections than anything else. And if the decline in the West is going to be stopped, if the hemorrhaging there is going to stop, it's because of that speech. He didn't have to give that speech. And I'll guarantee you some of the rank and file folks over at State Department were going apoplectic over it, just like they did when Ronald Reagan insisted on including the line in his speech that calling the Soviets an evil empire, or telling them to tear down the Berlin Wall. I mean, you could just see the little bureaucrats at the State Department turning blue in the face over those things. But we understand that Reagan was a statesman because he understood the significance of that. And it's that same understanding of the significance of those words and those challenges that J.D. Vance brought to the table in that speech. And I think that's why we're confident, even though he's young and even though he's at the beginning of what will likely be a very prominent and successful career for our country, that we're confident in giving him the award.
JD Vance, incredible talent. The always talented John Eastman, great to have you here. We look forward to dinner tonight.
Thank you very much.
Well, here we are at the 2025 Claremont Statesmanship Award dinner. This important event with the Vice President of the United States in attendance. But before we get into all that, I mean, I think this is a time where people want statesmanship, but the word itself, they want leadership, right? This is the word people would use for it. And the word itself, statesman, almost sounds like too far removed, right? It almost sounds like something that's in the past, whatever that means. Like that's like George Washington.
Too fancy.
Yeah. But nonetheless, this is an important word, and it's at the heart of this award. So what the hell is statesmanship?
Well, given the difficulty of politics and the vagaries of history and human nature, it's doing the most good you could do given the circumstances. I realize that's not a very satisfying answer, but that's really what it is. And at its heart is not really leadership, although that's sort of a more modern term, but this older term, prudence, which is having practical wisdom, knowing how to get things done within the constraints that are given to you. So statesmanship in the American context is Republican statesmanship, small r Republican. And to see it, it's what Churchill said of prudence or of the great souled man, you kind of know it when you see it. Right? That's what Aristotle said. And that's kind of what you have with statesmanship. You know it when you see it. It's a hard thing to define theoretically, but when you see it in action, especially at the very heights of it, it's a sublime, beautiful thing.
So what did you say? You said doing the most good you can in the circumstances you're sort of stuck with. Is that right? And so what and that's for all statesmen, whatever kind of regime you're in, whether it's a monarchy or whatever. People can act that way. They can be statesmen anytime, any place, in a way.
Sure.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And so what is Republican statesmanship? What's particular to that, do you think? Like what does American statesmanship mean?
Well, it has at its core the truths of the Declaration of Independence in mind, at least implicitly, or the statesman does when operating. And he has this tethered to the people in the United States in a way. So monarchical statesmanship, you might have a wider field to do some good because you're less encumbered by constraints, one of which is the will of the people. And especially in our system, exercising their re-consent after 4 years to another term. So it's in a way it's harder, Republican statesmanship. You have the Friedmans and Nicholas Kristofs of the world. They just want to be China for a day because they could fix all the problems.
Because they could just enforce their will, right?
They could do whatever they wanted to. So in America, it's more difficult.
So say a little bit about that, good and bad, because a critic could say, well, the problem with Republican statesmanship then, Ryan, is that president of the Claremont Institute, the fake statesman, right, can come in and mislead people. And boy, do we know that people have been misled in elections before in America, and they can believe some very bad things and go the wrong way. So getting the consent of the governed, how do you do that? What's the difference between that in a good way and a bad way?
The good way would look after the common good, and the bad way would be, it's sort of the age-old distinction from the ancient philosophers for us. The bad regime is one that feathers the nest of the person who runs it for their personal interest. And the good version, aristocracy versus oligarchy, tyranny versus monarchy, the good version is one where the good of the people and the common good is first, at the center of mind. I have a concrete example in America of circumstances limiting what you can do, and it's very present for us now. President Trump and Vice President Vance and the administration just passed the big beautiful bill, and people are complaining about it's not doing anything about the debt or the deficit, including a famous owner of a social media company who wants to go to Mars. But the problem is there's really no political constituency in the country right now to do serious things about the debt. So what does a statesman do? Well, at the very least, be prepared for some sort of debt crisis when it comes, and be prepared to address it and lead the people. If we finally hit that inflection point and people finally realize, because they don't right now, how big of a problem the debt and the debt deficit are, then the statesman says, well, okay, we've been thinking about this a long time. Here's what we have to do. Otherwise, we're going to not make it.
It's unbelievable to me. I mean, here we are at this event. Lots of politicians that have interacted with them over time. Charlie Kirk is here. A number of other people are here. And we all know, the mean politician, let's say. And we don't have anything better.
But average, not me, not the nasty one. Yeah.
Now, mean tweets, that might be good. But so, the average, let's say, That's maybe better. And the problem is that I don't think that you correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we have a different impression than everyone in the audience does about the fact that there is a lack of statesmanship in this country, and that so many people in Congress, they seem to want to be influencers or something. They don't seem to want to legislate or do their job. They don't even know how to do their job, right? They don't pass budgets, right? So how do you find and form the people who are actually going to just try to do the job, who see their fame, their honor, tied up with actually pursuing the common good, as you said?
Yeah, well, you can. We give this sort of speech to our young fellows sometimes. It's a great time to be involved in politics in America because the crisis is coming, great change is afoot, and so that's a great opportunity if you're intelligent and ambitious. And what we try to do at the Claremont Institute is equip them with the older way of thinking about American politics and the older way of how to do it, so that at the very least we can try to inspire them to change course. The big problem that they're facing, and you mentioned them not even knowing how to legislate, is we've had now for 70, 80, 90 years, you and I have discussed this before, this giant administrative state that corrupted the budget process. It has led to a Congress that really doesn't legislate anymore. It occasionally passes giant spending bills under the threat of, so holding guns to their own head. So it's no way to run a railroad. But if we're going to get back to anything more sane and responsible, it starts with learning how it's supposed to operate. And, we might, look, we're never going back to 1789 or 76 or whatever. We have to adapt it for our times. But getting a more responsible legislature is really the biggest struggle that we have right now.
And I mean, this is an interesting question because, when you think about it, you select leaders, right? You select talent. That's what the fellowships are. Yeah. I mean, that's what, you've done this for a long time. You've been in and around the fellowships, right, for a long time. And so when you look at that, I mean, you're trying to select people who will become statesmen, or at least have the will to be. Yeah. So what do you notice when you think back about the kinds of people that you're looking for, and the kinds of people that really everyone in the audience should look for when they're thinking about who to vote for?
Well, you're looking for intelligent, public-spirited young people, people who, you spot it in different ways, but have a certain zeal for their country and love it and want to help save it. And that usually comes across palpably in the people who are going to be really good at it. You play the law of averages. We've had over 1,000 fellows. Not everyone's perfect, but you just do the best you can. You try to attract talent through marketing and inspire them to be their very best selves. And as I said, you can actually, in a way, if they're really successful at it, they could be saviors or participate in the saving of the republic, which is a great spur to their love of honor and fame. You just have to be properly channeled.
Well, that's why I'm lucky you may be Washington Fellow, because it's the best time to be a Washington Fellow for Claremont, because we won, baby, and all these people, all these incredible Claremont Fellows are throughout D.C., and I think you can tell them for the most part because they're trying to do the right thing, right? They're trying to save America, as you've taught them for years. I think that when you look at the broader picture of what statesmanship is, this award is important just to use that word, just to educate people about what that means and to aspire to higher and higher heights. But let me be a jerk for a minute and say, okay, Ryan, well, the Statesmanship Award, that's pretty lofty. But JD Vance is really young, and he's the vice president, for a little while now. He's a young guy. So why is this younger guy getting the Statesmanship Award?
Well, partly because we were inspired by Trump's choice of him as vice president. I mean, I'll say in my remarks tonight that it was a gutsy pick. I mean, Vance was not the normal GOP way of picking vice presidential candidates. It's, they didn't need him to win Ohio. You didn't need him to reassure the establishment. In fact, the opposite was the case. And I think Trump saw in Vance someone who is intelligent, a very skilled communicator, and someone who really was filled with what I talked about, a zeal for putting his country back on the right track. And it helps to be young and fairly good looking and, not too short. Speaking as a short man, it fits the mold. And I think, JD has shown in recent years to be a quick learner about the political scene, about what's possible, about what's needed to usher in a new golden age, as they keep talking about in America. And so Trump endorsed the future of the party in many ways by picking him. And he acted in a statesmanly way, I would argue Trump did, as opposed to picking some safe establishment candidate. So we wanted to recognize that. We've been friends with Vice President Vance since before he ran for the Senate, tried to help him in any way we can through our DC office. A lot of his former staff and even a couple current staff are former fellows of ours. So we expect great things. We need to revive it and make statesmanship great again, at least as a concept. Because, people will get cynical about politics and they think it's all just about lying, raising money, and betraying your voters and not being held accountable. But at its height, it's one of the most important things that a country needs to get right. And we've been failing for a long time, and hopefully we're back on some semblance of a better track.
Ron Williams, thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
All right, the first summer series is in the book. So Matt, they were great interviews there. So what really stands out to you amongst all those 3 interviews there that we just saw?
Well, I think these are 3 people who really understand what statesmanship is and can break it down. And, a lot of these big, lofty concepts people talk about are really simple at the end of the day. And the simple answer is it's the person who knows what to do in the circumstance, which isn't always the same thing, right? So they can take stock of all the different parts and pieces of everything that's going on and then decide what the right thing to do is. Because remember, you put the statues up at the people who have to make hard decisions when it's not clear what you should do. That's why you get the statue, right? Because it's not clear, because no one would want to be in your shoes, because you have to make very tough decisions where if you get it wrong, it affects, hundreds of thousands, millions of people. It affects everyone else in the community. It takes down the entire entity. So those are the big dog decisions that you have to make. And so we respect and honor the people who know the right thing to do and just how to craft that in those situations. Now, how do you become that person is something that was also an interesting question. You have to form those people in the right way. You can't manufacture, right, statesmanship, but you can form people the right way so at least they move in the right direction. And really, it's about having the right habits of how you live your life over time, the right habits of soul, so that when you are in a tough situation, you have the wisdom to know what to do, and people, come to you and say, what should I do here? This is really difficult. Then you're the kind of person who can unpack all of that, right? And so there's no substitute for the simple things, for people who are actually, striving for virtue and the right habits in their own life, and that gives them clarity of sight and vision in these moments.
When you have to go through and learn from history, we are taking it all the way back for the founders on our Friday series for the summer series. So Matt, a great start.
Yeah, plenty more to come. It was wonderful to do those. Charlie was great. Ryan was great. John Eastman's a great man. He should be Attorney General someday. But we're going to do a lot more of these, and it's going to be fun.
We will. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you back here on Monday.